Hello, this is Jackie Cohen, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Monday, July 27th issue of the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Mullen promised a quieter DHS. Then came the shootings. Agency remains controversial after leadership change. If he were confirmed as the new Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Markwayne Mullin vowed he would take the agency out of the headlines. Surges of immigration enforcement in several cities had grown increasingly unpopular among Americans, especially after DHS employees killed at least 2 U.S. citizens in the winter. The year continued with historic spending on DHS and a record year for deaths in detention. My goal in 6 months is that we're not in the lead story every single day, said Mullen. Then, a Republican senator from Oklahoma said at his March 18th Senate confirmation hearing, "My goal is for people to understand we're out there, we're protecting them, and we're working with them. My goal is to make every one of you proud." He promised a shift in how the agency conducted itself, to hum quietly as it carried out President Donald Trump's sweeping immigration enforcement priorities while protecting the country. Less than 4 months later, that's changed. Mullen finds his agency back in the international spotlight after U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers fatally shot 2 people in 2 American cities in less than a week. On July 7th, an ICE officer shot into a van during a traffic stop, killing the 52-year-old driver, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, a father from Mexico, as he was starting his workday in Houston. Then, on the morning of July 13th, an ICE officer shot Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, 25, during a traffic stop in Bideford, Maine, killing the Colombian father who was authorized to work in the country. Protests followed. In both cases, DHS officials said officers feared for their safety. ICE initially halted traffic stops in the wake of the shootings. Trump reversed that decision a day later. The shootings also sparked a new political fight over why ICE officers weren't wearing body cameras. DHS and some key Republicans blamed Democrats for the rollout of the cameras, even though the department had vowed to ensure all ICE arrest teams had the cameras within 60 days. In a July 15th statement to USA Today, Mullen said the number one goal for DHS is to keep our officers safe and get criminals off our streets. Illegal aliens will be arrested and deported wherever they are. If you are here illegally, leave now, Mullen said, adding officers are facing increases in vehicle attacks. Mullen said attempting to evade arrest is dangerous. This reckless illegal alien activity comes after sanctuary politicians held webinars and shared resources for how to openly defy ICE, he said, laying out criticism of a number of leading Democratic politicians. Detention deaths at record high. The Trump administration began Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis in December, and the sweeping operations led by DHS carried into 2026. Protests erupted in response to masked, armed agents flooding American streets. A week into the new year, an ICE officer in Minneapolis fatally shot Renee Good, a 37-year-old U.S. citizen and mother, while she was inside her vehicle during a protest. 2 weeks later, and about a mile away, U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents killed another U.S. citizen, Alex Preddy, a nurse, also 37, during a protest. Then DHS Secretary Kristi Noem quickly labeled the 2 victims domestic terrorists before video evidence emerged contradicting her account. Soon, support declined among Americans over the heavy-handed tactics of agents conducting aggressive immigration enforcement in U.S. cities, polling showed. The tactics began drawing outrage from Democrats and Republicans. While the surge operation eventually drew down, DHS has continued to have a tumultuous 2026. Lauren Bies, an acting assistant secretary at DHS, told USA Today this year that DHS has delivered on Trump's promise to arrest and deport migrants suspected of crimes. Our border is now closed, Bies said in a statement. For the last 12 months, there have been 0 releases at the border. We will continue to deliver on the president's promise to make America safe again. She said 70% of people are charged of convicted crimes in the country, with over 3 million people removed. While detentions and deportations are at record levels, it's unlikely 3 million people have been removed, according to an analysis of federal data. And the vast majority of people apprehended have not been convicted of any crimes, with just 3% having a violent felony conviction, according to a recent analysis by the Data Deportation Project, which obtained ICE data via a public records request. At the same time, the United States has seen a record number of deaths of people held in immigration detention. Since 2025, there have been at least 52 deaths in ICE custody, according to a USA Today tracker. Through early July, there had been 21 deaths in 2026. The rate of detention deaths since Trump took office in his second term is at the highest level in over a decade, according to a Human Rights Watch report published in June. Single-minded focus. Founded in the shadow of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, DHS has grown to a gargantuan size, with hundreds of billions of dollars injected into expanding detentions and deportation efforts while hardening the southern border. It is a single-minded focus on removing people from the country, said Doris Meissner, a former commissioner of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, a precursor to DHS under Presidents Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. In doing so, Meissner, now a senior fellow at the Migration Policy Institute, said the agency is getting historic military-level funding. DHS, particularly ICE, now has more funding than some countries' entire military budgets. Meissner said DHS operations since Minneapolis appear quieter, but the Trump administration has prioritized only one part of immigration, namely enforcement. Officials are neglecting aspects of the system for immigration courts, asylum, and legal immigration, she said. They've taken a series of actions that have certainly changed the optics, Meissner said. I'm not at all persuaded that there's any change in the policy itself. With the record spending have come reform efforts and alleged mismanagement of taxpayer dollars. The deaths of Pretty and Good allowed congressional Democrats in the minority to force a record shutdown of DHS, aiming to reform the agency. Those efforts failed, Meissner said. The shutdown ended while DHS continued to receive vast amounts of federal dollars. But Noem's appearances before Congress in March may have cost her job. Noem reportedly had to personally approve every agency contract. During the shutdown, DHS procured a pair of new luxury jets, each valued at upward of $70 million for Noem's travel. Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, grilled Noem over her spending, including a $220 million television ad that Noem said the president approved. Trump reportedly had not. Kennedy told Fox News that Noem was as dead as a fried chicken. Senator Thom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, called Noem's leadership a disaster. FIFA controversies. Mullen filled Noem's role, promising to steer the agency away from controversy as he dealt with the shutdown. Lawmakers confirmed his nomination, though Mullen, a former MMA fighter and business owner, began his own spats with Democratic cities and states. The Trump administration decried the shutdown's effects on air travel, with Transportation Security Administration employees missing paychecks in March before the president took executive action to get TSA workers paid. The administration controversially deployed ICE into airports. Protests erupted in New Jersey at an ICE detention facility where detainees staged a labor and hunger strike. In reaction to what he saw as a lack of response by local officials, Mullen threatened to stop processing international arrivals, potentially upending business and tourism to cities that drive the country's economy. Tom Homan, the administrator's border czar who oversaw the drawing down of the operation in Minneapolis, had threatened to surge ICE agents to New York City, a major economic engine for the country with scores of immigrant enclaves. Homan complained about Democratic city and state officials over so-called sanctuary policies that limit local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. All that came as the United States co-hosted the World Cup, the global soccer tournament that dwarfs the Super Bowl, with millions of fans visiting from around the world. DHS helped oversee security measures for 78 matches in the United States in June and July. DHS said the Federal Emergency Management Agency invested nearly $900 million in host cities to protect residents and visitors. But fans have decried the U.S. government's handling of visa restrictions and travel bans. The Iranian national team was forced to train in Tijuana, Mexico. Iraqi fans were unable to obtain visas to watch their team compete in Boston and Philadelphia. Just days before the tournament kicked off, CBP turned away Omar Artan, the African men's referee of the year, who was set to be the first Somali to referee a FIFA World Cup match. Beese of DHS said Artan was deemed inadmissible due to vetting concerns. Is Mullen different? Meanwhile, DHS has been given even more funding to carry out its priorities. In June, Republicans took the unconventional step of funding DHS for 3 years with a $70 billion reconciliation bill. That's on top of $170 billion from the president's 2025 tax and spending law. Even if Democrats take control of Congress in the 2026 midterm elections, the new spending cements resources for Trump's immigration enforcement for the rest of his second term. Representative James Walkinshaw, Democrat of Virginia, a member of the House Homeland Security and Oversight Committees, said DHS has been unwieldy and difficult to manage since its creation. But the level of new funding, including with contracting practices, has had little sunlight. Wilkinshaw said it's unclear how Mullen departs from Noam on issues such as warehouse purchases for detention centers. In June, officials said expansion plans would not move forward, with a DHS statement saying ICE would use existing spaces rather than new, empty warehouses. Court records indicate the agency is selling at least one Michigan warehouse it previously purchased. We've seen commitments to review and assess things, but we haven't seen any tangible changes to clean up their act, Walkinshaw said. That's disappointing because this is about the reputation of an agency that is going to exist when Donald Trump is no longer president. For his part, Mullen has gone before lawmakers to outline the changes he is making to DHS. For instance, as part of an effort to unwind some of the practices that drew bipartisan criticism under the former secretary, he ended many Noam-era contracts that weren't yet signed. In congressional testimony in recent months, Mullen has said that DHS follows the law and will continue to do so. We swore to uphold the Constitution just like you swore to uphold the Constitution, Mullen told lawmakers in June. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Unknown Susan B. Anthony letter acquired. Discusses 1872 arrest addressed to President. A newly discovered handwritten letter reveals Susan B. Anthony's response days after her 1872 arrest for illegally voting. The RAB collection announced July 23rd that it acquired the previously unknown letter, which Anthony addressed to President Ulysses S. Grant 1 week after her arrest in Rochester. Although historians believe Anthony intended to send the letter, there is no evidence it ever reached the president. The document remained in a private collection for more than 50 years before its offering to the collection. It is now valued at $45,000. Nathan Rabb, president of the Rabb collection, said the letter captures Anthony's frustration following her arrest and reveals the emotion behind her constitutional argument for women's voting rights. What you're getting in this letter is Anthony's unfiltered thoughts, feelings, and wishes in the face of one of the more challenging moments in her life, and certainly a setback in the fight for women to vote legally, Raab said. I should say legally because they did vote. It's just their votes didn't count, and they were arrested for it. Anthony was arrested after voting in the 1872 presidential election, arguing the 14th and 15th Amendments guaranteed her right to vote. In the letter, she urged Grant to support legislation defining Americans' rights, argued all citizens should be allowed to vote, and compared his leadership to a monarchy. Raab said Anthony's message extended beyond her own case. She represented nearly half of the nation at the time through her words. She was frustrated on her own behalf, but also that there were other women who had been arrested with her and were still in prison, he said. I can only imagine her intense emotion knowing that there were other women in prison for voting. One detail Raab believes readers may overlook comes in Anthony's closing words. Anthony speaks out on behalf of herself and every woman in a similar position. She signs the letter on behalf of all women, he said. She's writing this on behalf of the women who are in prison at that moment, and also the more than half the population of the country who couldn't vote and had fewer rights. As many United States residents celebrated the nation's 250th anniversary this year, Raab said the letter serves as a reminder that the nation's founding ideals required generations of continued struggles. The idea that we can all vote, we can go in there and vote as equals, is something that people fought for. It wasn't just given to them, he said. New York health insurance costs to go up in 2027. ACA hikes proposed as essential plan cut back. New Yorkers who buy health insurance through the state-run Affordable Care Act marketplace may pay much more during next year as the double-digit percentage rate hikes are being proposed. The proposed 2027 rates show health insurers in New York have requested an average rate increase of 20.7% for individuals in the ACA marketplace and related programs, as well as an even higher proposed rate hike for small group plans of 25.7%. This comes as the state ended coverage for 450,000 New Yorkers earlier this month through a rollback of its essential plan, which covers those who don't have employer-sponsored plans and whose incomes are just above the cutoff to qualify for Medicaid. The state's funded by the federal government, the state reduced that program's coverage in response to funding cuts enacted last year by Republicans in Washington. Looking at the larger picture, all Americans are at risk of higher rates next year. Insurers nationally are proposing a median ACA premium increase of 14% for 2027 plans, according to an analysis published by the Peterson KFF Health System Tracker on July 8th. It's the second highest requested rate change since 2018, and if these rates are approved, consumers will have seen a more than one-third jump in typical premiums for insurers participating in the ACA marketplaces over a 2-year period. Why health insurance costs are spiking in New York. Health insurers in New York are pointing to increased drug costs and additional mandated benefits as reasons to increase rates for the more than 1 million New Yorkers currently enrolled in individual and small group plans through the state's ACA Health Exchange, New York State of Health. Here are some specifics. Provider prices in New York are 22% higher than the national average, according to the Health Care Cost Institute. More than 870 drugs saw price increases in January. The number of mandated benefits also grew as state lawmakers approved several bills requiring the coverage of specific services and limits on cost sharing in this year's legislative session. Taxes on health insurance, which total more than $7 billion annually, add to the cost of health insurance and increase the annual premium for the average family buying a policy in New York by more than $1,000. Other factors include the Trump administration's changes to marketplace rules, as well as continued effects from the expiration of tax credits instituted during the former Biden administration, USA Today reported. While the proposed rate hikes for next year have yet to be approved by the State Department of Financial Services, they range from a high of 52.1% through United Healthcare of New York to a low of 1.4% for CDPHP. The state agency has a history of reducing the rate increases sought by insurers, and final rates for next year will get approved in late August. How much have health insurance rates increased in past years? Rates for individual plans in 2026 increased by an average of 7.1%, and small group plan rates increased by 13%, according to state records. And according to previous USA Today Network reporting, the average rates for individual plans from 2019 to 2023 increased by a total of 31.4%, with an average yearly rise of around 6%. Small group plans increased 30.6% over that same period. For further details about specific health insurers' proposed rate increases for 2027, visit the state regulatory agency's website at dfs.ny.gov. You can also submit a comment about the requested increases through the agency's online portal. The agency also has a consumer hotline that is staffed Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at 800-342-3736. Are employer-provided health insurance costs also increasing? Yes, employer-provided health insurance costs are expected to rise across the country. According to benefits consultant Mercer, nearly half of U.S. employers with 500 or more employees are planning on making changes to their medical plans that will raise out-of-pocket costs next year. Teen's death more than just a mystery. Wells's case in Mississippi raises unhealed history. When Mississippi teenager Nolan Wells disappeared after a 4th of July boat trip, questions immediately began to swirl about what happened to him and why. 3 weeks after his body was found, many of those questions remain unanswered. Parallel investigations into his death have revealed little publicly so far. Wells's family fears his death will be written off as an accidental drowning, citing conflicting witness accounts and unusual cell phone activity. The mysterious death has attracted speculation from the public nationwide and attention from major true crime figures like Nancy Grace. But the death of a young black man after an outing with a predominantly white group of friends has also dredged up fears among Black Americans that they aren't safe in such environments and that the justice system won't handle their cases properly if something goes wrong, according to Nadine Smith, president and CEO of online civil rights organization Color of Change. Wells's family has launched their own independent investigation, citing that lack of trust in law enforcement in a state with a long history of racist violence. Officials in Jackson County, Mississippi, have said they have not found signs of foul play, but are continuing to investigate. There are two stories unfolding here. One is the mystery of what happened to him, and the other is that it has surfaced in the American consciousness, especially among Black Americans, some familiar anxieties, Smith said. It is really a story of the unhealed history and lived pattern recognition in Black America. Officials said Wells traveled with friends to Horn Island, about 10 miles off the coast of Mississippi, to celebrate the 4th of July. According to the National Park Service, the island is only accessible via private boat, and there is no staff, drinking water, shelter, facilities, or communication on the island. GPS data obtained by CBS News from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources showed the boat reportedly arrived around 11:14 a.m. and left at 4:31 p.m. Family attorney Ben Crump has said Wells's friends reported they last saw him around 3 p.m. Christine Wansley, Wells's mother, said a friend of Wells contacted her around 11 p.m. that night, setting off a frantic search. Wansley said the family met with law enforcement around midnight and were eventually able to track down Wells's phone and car, which were at different locations. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office led a land and water search on July 5th and 6th, assisted by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, National Park Service employees, the United Cajun Navy, and other volunteers. The search ended July 6th after the United Cajun Navy announced a body was discovered on the northwest end of the island. The body was later identified as Wells. An independent autopsy, which was conducted by forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell, could not determine the cause or manner of Wells's death, Crump announced July 22nd. Bailey C. Martin, a spokesperson for the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, confirmed in a July 22nd statement to USA Today that the state medical examiner completed an initial autopsy on Wells on July 7th at 8:30 a.m., and the investigation is active and ongoing. Crump said there were glaring contradictions in the accounts given by the last people to see Wells alive. The people Wells arrived with said he was talking to a young woman, chose to stay behind, and planned to ride back with someone else, according to officials. The young woman says that he went and got back on the boat with the boys, Crump said. The boys say no, he said he was going to stay with her, and that's a conflict. The family and their supporters have said the notion that Wells chose to stay behind on the island without his cell phone or keys doesn't make sense. Crump also questioned how Wells, who knew how to swim, could have drowned without anyone seeing him struggling. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind told CNN the currents can be strong on the barrier islands, and there have been drownings many times over the years. Experts have said drowning can be fast, silent, and look different than one might expect. It is very, very easy to drown, and nobody recognizes that, said Andrea Zafiris, a medical legal death investigator who trains law enforcement on aquatic death and homicide investigation. Zafiri said there are 3 major questions investigators need to answer when a body is found in or near water. Does it make sense that the body was found in the water at that time? Does the location, position, posture, and state of the victim and the people who reported the death make sense? And does it make sense the victim is dead? You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Too often, she said, uncovering what really happened when a person dies in these circumstances becomes incredibly challenging because everybody has the opportunity to make assumptions that the cause of death is drowning. Though it's not yet clear what happened to Wells, Smith said the circumstances surrounding his death shed a spotlight on the common experience of being the only Black person in a predominantly white group. Smith, who grew up in the Florida Panhandle, recalled her own experience of being one of just 2 Black girls on her high school softball team. She said the dynamic can not only be isolating, but dangerous. You can't think about these stories without thinking about the things that our parents taught us, that we have taught our children, Smith said. Even in the most integrated communities, you can't do what your white friends do. You can't go all of the places they can go without being very vigilant about your safety, because it has been true in our lives. The Reverend Al Sharpton has said advocates are not definitively linking Wells's death to racism, but they're not discounting it as a factor yet either. So to tell us, don't rush to judgment saying it was racist is fine. But then I'm telling you, don't rush to judgment saying it was not racism because we do not know, Sharpton said. In Ohio, dogs help curtail Canada goose populations. Donning a bright yellow vest and paddling her way through the water, Elle, a 2-year-old border collie, has her sights set on the prize, a flock of Canada geese just a few yards ahead. As a herding dog tasked with rounding up geese, Elle is doing exactly what her instincts tell her to do. What she doesn't know is that for business and homeowners who hire geese chasers, the company she works for, she's providing a humane alternative for getting rid of the birds that doesn't involve nest destruction or euthanasia. As she walked around the edges of a neighborhood retention pond on July 16th, she waited patiently for instructions from her handler, Tucker Helfer, vice president of the business development at Geese Chasers Ohio. Elle's goal is never to harm the geese, but rather to scare them into relocating. Jason Helfer, owner of the Geese Chasers Ohio franchise since 2022, said not only are their dogs unique in that they can work off-leash and swim into ponds to access flocks, but their services are also recommended by PETA under its list of humane goose control solutions. We have highly trained border collies, and those border collies are trained to herd, not hurt, livestock, or in this case, flocks of geese, said Jason Helfer, who is based out of Cleveland. Their idea of herding them is to get them to fly to a better habitat. The Canada goose is a migratory bird that's protected at the federal level under the 1918 Migratory Bird Treaty Act and under Ohio state law. The animal originates in Canada and migrates each year to warmer regions in northern Mexico and the southern United States. Canada geese were essentially non-existent in Ohio by the end of the Civil War due to overhunting. In the 1950s, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service began a restoration program and released 10 pairs of geese in Ohio, according to Gary Comer, a wildlife management supervisor with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Over time, some of the birds stopped migrating, eventually morphing into a subspecies of close resemblance that now resides in central Ohio, the giant Canada goose. Although it doesn't migrate, the giant Canada goose maintains its status as a protected species. There's really a lack of natural predators, Comer said. There's all this habitat from the manicured lawns to all these retention ponds, and with the urban and suburban development, populations just continue to climb. Geese chasers and their team of border collies visit properties that range from warehouses to subdivisions, struggling with the birds' aggressive presence. By consistently making their rounds, they can effectively prevent the geese from coming back, or, if they start early enough in the season, from nesting on the property. They never use violent methods to clear the area. We're not looking to round them up under the cloak of darkness and euthanize them for the sake of euthanizing them, Jason Helfer said. There is no chance that we will do anything or take a client on that would want us to harm nature in that way. Although giant Canada geese are present in central Ohio all year, there are usually more sightings when they're raising their young in March, April, and May. During this time, they're known for slowly crossing roads, defecating on sidewalks, and nesting in front of businesses, often harassing passersby who get too close. Comer said not only are these birds territorial over their nests and offspring, they're also flightless for a portion of the year as they molt their feathers, leading them to interact with roadways more often. They're walking everywhere they go, Comer said. It's kind of like Mother Nature's way of ensuring they're good parents and protecting their offspring, because the offspring also can't fly. Despite the goose's complicated relationship with the public, Tucker Helfer said he's developed a certain affinity for the birds because of his constant close proximity to them. He hopes people come to realize that they're highly intelligent animals that deserve respect. Jason Helfer agreed. Life is valuable, and the balance of nature is extremely important, Jason Helfer said. The birds have a right to not only live, but to thrive. Oak tree disease confirmed in Monroe for first time. State officials have confirmed the first known case of oak wilt in Monroe County after an infected tree was identified in the town of Greece. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation notified the town that one of its oak trees tested positive for the fungal disease, which is often fatal to oak trees. Oak wilt is caused by the fungus Brachyella phagoserium, which blocks the movement of water and nutrients inside infected trees. Symptoms include wilting leaves, early leaf drop and branch dieback, and most infected trees eventually die. The disease was first detected in New York in 2008 and has largely remained confined to isolated areas in the Finger Lakes, including parts of Ontario and Yates counties. Oak wilt spreads primarily through sap feeding and bark beetles that are attracted to fresh wounds on oak trees. It can also spread underground through connected root systems between neighboring oak trees. Town officials said they are working with the DEC to remove the infected tree and treat the stump to help prevent the disease from spreading. Nearby oak trees will also be monitored. The town is asking residents in the area west of Interstate 390 to Long Pond Road and south of English Road to Vintage Lane to watch for signs of oak wilt. Symptoms include sudden leaf wilting and early leaf drop, between early July and late August. Leaves that turn brown starting at the edges and progressing inward. Branch dieback that begins at the top of the tree and moves downward. Residents who believe an oak tree may be infected are encouraged to photograph the tree, its leaves, and the base of the trunk and submit a report through the DEC's Forest Health Reporting Form or call the DEC Forest Health Information Line at 866-640-0652. Officials also remind homeowners to avoid pruning or damaging oak trees between March and September, when beetles that spread the fungus are most active. Residents should also follow New York's firewood regulations, which limit transporting untreated firewood more than 50 miles from its source. Our tree population is one of the things that makes Greece a beautiful place to live, and we take any threat to them very seriously, Greece Supervisor Jeff McCann said in a statement. We are working closely with the DEC to respond to this case quickly and responsibly, and we encourage residents to keep an eye on their own oak trees and report anything unusual. A little awareness now can go a long way in protecting our neighborhoods for years to come. July's full moon, the buck moon, will be in full glory this week. July's full moon is in sight, the buck moon. The name comes from Native American, colonial American, and European traditions and marks the time of year when new antlers on male deer, bucks, are growing quickly, according to the Old Farmer's Almanac. The buck moon peaks at 10:36 a.m. Eastern Time, July 29th, according to the Farmer's Almanac. It will still look full a few days before and after it peaks. Why is it called the buck moon? July's full moon is called the buck moon since it aligns with the time of year when new antlers on male deer, or bucks, are growing quickly, according to the Old Farmer's Almanac. Bucks will regrow their antlers every year ahead of mating season, then shed them during the late winter once mating season is over, according to Mississippi State University. The buck moon is also known as the berry moon, feather molting moon, salmon moon, thunder moon, and halfway summer moon, according to the Farmer's Almanac. When is the following full moon? The next full moon after July's buck moon will be the sturgeon moon on August 28th. The August full moon is expected to peak at 12:18 a.m. Eastern Time, according to Space.com. It also coincides with a partial lunar eclipse, which will be visible throughout New York and North America, weather pending, according to timeanddate.com. New York expands work zone speed camera program to more roads. The New York State Department of Transportation is expanding its automated work zone speed enforcement program, allowing speed cameras to be used in substantially more highway and road work zones across New York. In 2021, the state reported more than 370 work zone intrusions and 50 injuries. A work zone intrusion occurs when a motor vehicle enters a portion of the roadway that is closed for construction or maintenance. The 5-year pilot program allowed the deployment of speed enforcement cameras to a limited number of work zones operated by the DOT and Thruway Authority. Despite these efforts, the State Department of Transportation reported increasing work zone crashes on the New York State Thruway in 2025, with 366 crashes resulting in 58 injuries and 2 deaths, including Highway Maintenance Supervisor Robert Bornt. Bornt, 54, was struck by a driver during a work zone intrusion in Pittstown. We continue to pray for his family and friends and also take his death extremely seriously, State Department of Transportation Commissioner Marie-Therese Dominguez said. In 2025, state officials extended the program to 2031, including MTA bridges, tunnels, and New York State Bridge Authority properties. Provisions adopted under the New York State 2027 enacted budget amended the New York Vehicle and Traffic Law Section 1180-E. The amendments will expand the list of eligible roadways where speed cameras can be deployed. Under the change, speed cameras can be deployed in work zones on nearly any state roadway with DOT crews. State Senator Jeremy Cooney, Democrat of Rochester, said the expansion means cameras can be deployed far beyond major highways, not just on the Thruway, not just on 490 or 590, Any state road where workers are doing the work, Cooney said. The message today is very simple. Treat workers like your neighbors, because they are your neighbors. This is about safety. It's about saving lives, and it's about improving our roads across the state of New York. State officials continue to encourage drivers to follow speed limit in work zone areas. Signage will be posted on the roadway near construction zones to warn drivers of upcoming speed cameras. Speed cameras will be placed on DOT-owned pickup trucks within the work zone. Groups challenge council's slur ban. LA meeting rules aim at curbing fighting words. Two civil liberties groups are demanding the Los Angeles City Council throw out its rule banning people during meetings from using two racial slurs, a racial epithet and a crude term often used to disparage women, alleging in part that the prohibition violates the First Amendment. The council implemented the two-word ban in late July 2025. The motion the council passed putting in place the ban stated action was necessary because the two words had been used and disrupted its meetings on many occasions. The sergeants at arms prevented fights that were on the cusp of breaking out on at least 2 occasions, it said. But free speech advocates warned the council the move could put the city on a slippery slope toward unconstitutional censorship. Among them were the First Amendment Coalition, which said the council's efforts stood to amplify the objectionable message and allow those who utter it to claim victory as defenders of free speech. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, also said the rule would implement an unconstitutional solution when better alternatives that do not infringe on the speech rights of your constituents are available. Both groups made similar arguments in a joint demand letter sent to the council July 23rd. It alleged the two-word ban, as well as a policy barring people removed from meetings from attending future meetings for a fixed time period, violates both the First Amendment and the Ralph M. Brown Act, a California law that allows legislative bodies to remove meeting attendees based on behavior that actually disrupts, disturbs, impedes, or renders infeasible the orderly conduct of the proceedings. If the council does not repeal the ban within 30 days, the letter said the groups intended to sue over the matter. We're not here to defend the merits of the words themselves, or really any words for that matter, said Zach Silver, staff attorney for FIRE. This case is not about these words. It's about the government's right to ban really any word. The council did not immediately respond to USA Today's request for comment. The organizations are representing Los Angeles resident Stacy Segarra-Bollinger, who serves on the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council. She's used unorthodox means of expressing her opposition to the word ban, such as through saying, "Council is afraid of the word," crude word, while singing to the tune of Ghostbusters theme song during the council's Halloween meeting. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. After singing "I'm Not Calling Anyone a Crude Word" to the tune of Adele's "Someone Like You" at the council meeting on December 3, 2025, Council President Marquise Harris-Dawson asked the clerk to pause Segarra-Bollinger's time and issued what he said would be her only warning for violating Council Rule 7. As Harris-Dawson was speaking, Segarra-Bollinger noted that she'd used the term several times before he stopped her and rejected the notion that she was being disruptive. Harris-Dawson then called on a city attorney who told Segarra-Bollinger it was not your opportunity to speak, given her paused time, and said it was disruptive to interrupt the council president or any council member while they're speaking. Harris-Dawson then said Segarra-Bollinger had 1 second remaining of her allotted time, to which she responded with the crude word. You are dismissed from this meeting and all future meetings today subject to Rule 7 and Rule 12, Harris-Dawson said, a reference to both the word ban and the council's decorum rules. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Segarra-Bollinger said the conflict isn't about these words in particular in a statement provided to USA Today. This is about the right of public to speak freely without constraints, no matter how offensive or objectionable the government may find the feedback, she said. Allowing the council to impose rules on which words are okay is a bad idea that opens the door to future censorship. The council's 2025 motion described the two words as offensive epithets that are inherently harmful, citing the Supreme Court's 1942 decision in Chaplinsky v. New Hampshire. The ruling said some terms, by their very utterance, inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. Such fighting words, the court found, are not protected by the First Amendment. But Silver said the Supreme Court had not upheld a fighting words conviction since then, and that Fire believes there's no word that is inherently disruptive. He questioned whether it would be disruptive to read an excerpt from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, for example, or quote Los Angeles City records referencing a street formerly known as racial epithet Alley. A spokesperson for Harris Dawson previously told USA Today the rule was not a ban on offensive speech in general, nor does it limit the public's right to criticize, protest, or speak passionately. Instead, it draws a line at language that, by consistent and documented use, has disrupted the council's ability to conduct public business and discouraged public participation, the spokesperson said. Congress looks into rules around dating staffers. Lawmakers' love lives are under a microscope as part of the next phase of a broader ethical reckoning on Capitol Hill. Prohibitions on legislators dating their own staffers have long been in place, but amid a spate of recent scandals, some prominent voices in Congress say stricter rules are long overdue. Bipartisan momentum is driving a new push to ban all members from having intimate relationships with any lower-level Hill employees, regardless of their boss. It's inappropriate as it would be in any workplace, said House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana. We should, at a bare minimum in Congress, have rules and traditions that are adhered to in corporate America. Such relationships are not unheard of, though Senator Jack Reed, Democrat of Rhode Island, met his wife, Julia Hart, when she was a Senate staffer for a separate office in 2002, while traveling with a congressional delegation. The pair have been married since 2005 and have a daughter. But the days of those types of workplace romances may be long gone. After two congressmen, Republican Tony Gonzalez and Democrat Eric Swalwell, resigned this year amid allegations of sexual misconduct involving subordinates, leaders in Congress are prepping a potential overhaul of the legislative branch's ethics rules. Female lawmakers, in particular, are leading a bipartisan charge to hold themselves and their male colleagues to higher standards. Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez, Democrat of New Mexico, the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, said a ban on members of Congress dating any staff has been a main focus of bipartisan ethics reform negotiations. Congress is a place you come to serve, not to date, she said in a statement to USA Today. We're looking forward to passing this ban and enacting greater reform measures that will not only protect young staffers, but change the culture on Capitol Hill. Representative Kat Kamak, Republican of Florida, the chair of the Republican Women's Caucus, is working with her Democratic counterpart to ready ethics legislation she hopes will be introduced as soon as September, after the House returns from August recess. If you are looking to proposition or date or get involved with another staffer on Capitol Hill, you still exhibit a tremendous amount of influence on that staffer's career, and that's just wrong, she said in a recent interview with 535 News. Part of the flurry of new interest in lawmakers' dating habits was prompted by a July 16th story in a conservative tabloid. Citing unnamed sources, the New York Post accused Senator Ruben Gallego, Democrat of Arizona, of having consensual relationships with lower-level staffers years ago while he was single. Gallego's office told USA Today he would support a broad ban on lawmakers having intimate relations with staffers, but he did not comment on the Post story. After Swalwell and Gonzalez were pushed out of the House, more scandals came to light. Representative Chuck Edwards, Republican of North Carolina, came under investigation by the chamber's ethics panel amid allegations of sexual harassment within his own office. Edwards' campaign spokesperson, Paul Shoemaker, told the USA Today network in May the congressman welcomes the review and insisted Edwards has done nothing wrong. Johnson has called the accusations against Edwards serious, however, and none of his colleagues have been quick to defend him. Instead, Republicans like Kamak have said it's past time to address the creepiness factor on Capitol Hill. Nun detained by ICE speaks out for first time. Lawyer says she's done everything asked of her. A Catholic nun who was detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers while walking to Mass in South Texas said she continues to live with fear and uncertainty weeks after her arrest drew national attention and bipartisan calls for her release. Sister Letitia Letty Agboaja, a 56-year-old nun from Nigeria, spoke publicly for the first time since she was detained by ICE officers on June 28th in McAllen, a city just north of the U.S.-Mexico border. During a news conference July 23rd, Agboaja described being stopped by two armed federal officers as she walked to Our Lady of Sorrows Church for Sunday Mass, where she was scheduled to serve as a Eucharistic minister. "I was very much afraid, with cold sweat," Agboaja said at the news conference. "I did not expect on an ordinary Sunday morning, when people should be ready to go to Mass to worship the Lord, that she would be taken into custody." Agboaja was released later the same day after intervention from members of Texas's congressional delegation and public outcry over the detention of a nun wearing her habit on her way to worship. The case sparked criticism from both Democrats and Republicans, who questioned why she had been detained. The League of United Latin American Citizens, the oldest and largest Latino civil rights organization in the United States, also launched a petition calling for an immediate investigation into her detention. Agboaja said many other immigrants face similar situations without the public attention her case received. She urged immigration authorities to give people an opportunity to be heard before they are taken into custody. There are many others in the same situation, people who have been given some form of protection under our laws, who have followed every rule asked of them and who still live with uncertainty, Agboaja said. USA Today has reached out to the Department of Homeland Security and ICE for comment. Agboaja's attorney, Carlos M. Garcia, said an immigration judge denied Agboaja's asylum claim in 2019, but granted her protection from removal to Nigeria, concluding that she had met the high legal standard required to show it was more likely than not she would face torture if returned there. The protection bars the U.S. government from deporting her to Nigeria, Garcia said, though she remains under a final order of removal because her asylum application was denied. Agboaja has complied with all conditions of her immigration status since the ruling, including maintaining employment authorization and attending required immigration appointments, according to Garcia. She has done everything the law has asked of her, he said at the news conference. Agboaja is scheduled to report to ICE on July 28th, and Garcia urged federal authorities not to detain her again or require her to wear an electronic monitoring device. When Agboaja was detained, Garcia said she was given little explanation for why she was being taken into custody. He noted that ICE was attempting to remove her to a third country. Over the last year, the Trump administration has dramatically expanded a little-known tactic of sending migrants to countries where they have no ties, USA Today previously reported. Critics have said this outsources detention to foreign governments, often those with records of human rights abuses, minimal oversight, and unclear legal protections. Germany calls Pride event ramming a terrorist attack. Suspect labeled Islamist militant sympathizer. Germany pledged to bring to justice those responsible for the July 25th deadly crowd ramming near a Pride event in Berlin, calling it a terrorist attack and identifying the suspect as a known Islamist militant sympathizer. A white minivan drove into pedestrians in the Tiergarten Park near the Brandenburg Gate at about 10 p.m. local time, not far from one of Europe's biggest annual LGBTQ pride celebrations, Christopher Street Day. One person was killed and 29 injured, ate seriously, Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt said. Everything we see here indicates that we are dealing with an Islamist terrorist attack, he told journalists in Berlin. The suspected perpetrator had attracted attention in the past through a high degree of criminal offenses, through radicalization, through membership of the Islamist scene, Dobrindt said, adding that he had a Lebanese background and was born in Germany in 2005. Berlin police said overnight they had identified a suspect, naming him as Abdul B and publishing his picture. They asked the public to help find him, describing him as slim, around 6 feet 2 inches tall, with black hair, and last seen wearing a black hooded top and white trousers. But they also warned people not to approach him, saying he was possibly armed and dangerous. Security sources told Reuters that the suspect had been released from juvenile detention only 2 months ago. They said he had sought contact with the Islamic State militant group, that he was known to domestic intelligence and was among the hundreds of people classed as potentially dangerous, a label that usually leads to scrutiny or monitoring. Of the 29 people who were wounded in Berlin, some suffered stab wounds, Dobrindt said. The fire service said 3 of the injured were in a life-threatening condition. Christopher Street Day organizers canceled the remainder of the events. Much about the incident remained unclear, including whether the perpetrator acted alone, since police said more than one person may have got out of the van. Reuters TV footage from the scene on July 26th showed a white minivan crumpled into a tree. The mass circulation newspaper Bild said it was a Citroen delivery vehicle that Abdul B had rented, adding that police had searched his apartment. The attack comes at a sensitive time for conservative Chancellor Friedrich Merz's unpopular coalition government, which is going through a bruising cabinet reshuffle as critics accuse it of being ineffective. State elections take place in 2 months, with the far-right opposition party Alternative for Germany, or AfD, campaigning on issues including immigration and security, in a bid to secure leadership of a regional government for the first time. The AfD was quick to comment on the attack. We will not allow religious extremists to divide our country with violence and intolerance, AfD co-chief Tino Trupala said on X. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Monday, July 27th issue of the Democrat Chronicle. Your reader has been Jackie Cohen. Thank you for listening.